this idea of I need to have a way to have my money work for me. I think that this is a remnant of the fiat system. What's happening is with crypto, what people are doing is they're trying to say, well, how do I make money on my crypto the same way you do in the fiat system? I'm saying I'm not so sure that's going to be the solution.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Bitcoin is Hard. This is a Choice App production about Bitcoin and personal finance. Whether you're new or old here, would appreciate if you do us a favor on the way in. Like, subscribe, and comment on YouTube. And if you're listening on the audio platform of Spotify or Apple, rate it and leave us a review because that helps get the message out there and just helps the podcast. So thanks so much. This episode is going to feel a little bit different than the others because I just brought a friend on. Patrick, Bitcoin Motorist, is here. We've hung out at meetups. Hung out Bitcoin 2022, and he's been around for a while, and he's just a great observer of everything. And so I thought he was a perfect guy to hang out with today and continue a conversation that we had on Twitter. And so here's another piece of setup I'll do and then give it to him. For the last couple of years, I've been thinking a lot about Bitcoin as base currency in meat space. Like moving forward, Bitcoin is base currency in meat space. I've been to burger stands with Patrick. Like we've talked about merchant adoption together. And that is all very exciting to me and has not stopped being exciting to me. However, something recently that I've been just dabbling back into and trying to think about with fresh eyes is Bitcoin as base currency of like Web3 and of DeFi and kind of what I call just buzzword land. Because for a while, to be focused on like Bitcoin as base currency in meat space and Bitcoin versus fiat, it did require putting some blinders on and just like fully thinking about it. And so in 2022, I've been trying to just kind of think about things differently and think about things from first principles as we should, as like smart, logical thinkers, and people talk about first principles. So that's really it for like context. That's what I'm going through right now. And so we're just going to do this live and hang out as friends. So Patrick, start us off with wherever. I also kind of want to chit chat just how was the most recent Pork Fest, but if you're already like feeling like commenting on anything I said or any of the current like Bitcoin maximalist stuff that's happened, I'm literally down to start anywhere.
Yeah, Brian, hey, thanks for having me on, Brian. I really appreciate the great work you're doing in the Bitcoin space and orange pilling people. You were running the Anaheim meetup for a while, so really, you were the one that introduced me to George and to Natalie for the first time. We had a great time over at Next Burger, where you just mentioned that briefly. So yeah, I mean, I'm into Bitcoin. I've been here for a long time, a Bitcoin observer, as you say. But I've been in the Bitcoin space for a long time, and I really got excited about the space because I think that revolutionizing money and separating money from state was what really excited me. Now, as far as the altcoin narratives go, so altcoiners, they're trying to fix a lot of other stuff. They're trying to fix, say, securities laws. They think securities laws are too onerous or something like that. And I'm not saying I agree with that, and I'm not even saying I disagree with that. There may be a lot of issues with securities laws, or they're trying to fix some sort of finding some inefficiency in the market and saying how maybe some crypto project can fix this inefficiency, whatever it is. What I'm saying is that that could all be well and good. That's great. If there's some niche thing that could be run slightly more efficiently by putting it on a blockchain, fine, go do it. But that's not really what excites me. That's not really why I got into the space. I got into the space to kind of fix the money. I feel like the money is severely broken. I don't know if necessarily securities are severely broken. I don't know if necessarily payments are severely broken. Although you and I both know we use Bitcoin for payments all the time. Some Bitcoiners may say all you're supposed to do is hodl, but I think it's actually very important for adoption of Bitcoin to actually use Bitcoin, not just as a savings tool, but also in transactions. And you and I both support that. When you and I both use that, we use Lightning, we use base chain Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is very useful for payments, as opposed to what the altcoin narrative is out there. So I think what I want to fix is savings first, and be able to allow people to save in money where they don't have to worry about being an investor, where every single person, no matter what their job is, doesn't have to be an investor. They can focus on what their actual profession is, and whatever extra productivity they have, they should be able to save it in something liquid that they can use on a moment's notice, rather than say, buying a house as an investment or investing in the stock market. I think it's great to invest in the stock market. I just don't know if that should be the only way to save long term. This is just a few of the things that I think about, because I've talked about a lot of these issues with, say, people like Bruce Fenton, who's actually running for Senate here in New Hampshire. I don't know how likely he is to win the Republican primary, but I'm pulling for him. Unfortunately, I won't be able to vote for him because I'm not officially registered as a Republican in New Hampshire. But I hope he wins the Republican primary, and I hope he becomes senator. But he's into a lot of stuff with his projects, his crypto projects, that I don't necessarily think these are earth shattering things that need to be tackled right away. So what's the I hope I'm not I hope I'm not, filibustering here, but like what's the thing that is so severely broken with securities? And I know maybe we're not on the topic that you were originally wanting to talk about, which was about these altcoins as companies, and we can touch on that as well. But what is it that is severely broken about securities that you need to have crypto to fix all this? So let's say I'm a small businessman. I want to open up a corner store or a coffee shop or something like that, and I need to invest X amount of tens of thousands of dollars into it, and maybe I don't have that cash on hand. So what do I do? Do I do a token sale and sell 1,000 or 20,000 shares of my coffee shop to some random investors who who may or may not know anything about my business and have no way of keeping tabs on whether I'm paying them the correct amount of revenue, or and are they going to try to micromanage my business to say how much coffee I should buy, how much I should charge each cup? I'm not really sure if this is a solution. I feel like it's a solution looking for a problem. I think if I was to open a corner coffee shop, I would need to either find investors or go to a bank and get a loan, and try to prove to the bank or these investors that I'm worthy enough to invest in. So I feel like a lot of these other projects out there, they may be solving some problems and maybe they're identifying problems correctly, but I don't know if their solutions are exactly what we need. So I don't know if you have anything to say about any of the many things that I touched on there.
No, perfect foundation. Like perfect foundation. We've had Bruce on the podcast. I agree. Shout out to Bruce. I hope that he wins as well, and was thankful to have him on. And I think so what you talked about for the first half was about why you're excited about Bitcoin and why you're passionate and obsessed with Bitcoin. And I agree. And I'm obsessed with Bitcoin and fix the money, fix the world, separate money and state. Bitcoin monetary policy is stronger than like fiat monetary policy, and it's just better for the world. So I totally agree. And in terms of I also am glad that you talked about, or that we brought up like how some altcoins are trying to fix things that are wrong with securities, because I think that's actually already a step past where some people are in the terms of, I think some people think that all altcoins are trying to be money. And that is very muddy. That is very muddy. And some people try to say that altcoins, you're printing money or whatever. And I tweeted out the other day that it's almost like, to understand Bitcoin, it requires this weird intersection of, you have to be kind of nerdy about computers, you have to be kind of nerdy about philosophy and politics, and you also have to be kind of nerdy about macroeconomics and just what is money. And that's a weird niche of people. Even 12, 13 years into this thing, the niche of people that kind of wrap their heads around all three aspects of that is small. And that's why we still argue about what is Bitcoin, what is Bitcoin, what is Bitcoin. And so I've in trying to kind of think differently this year, I'm trying to ask myself, to understand altcoins, to understand what's happening over there, what is the intersection of things you kind of have to understand. And I realized that there are what you have to understand, fundraising. You have to understand the problems with the current way of raising money or starting a company or investing in a company. And so a bunch of things have happened to me this year, but one of them was basically this. I realized that everyone that's kind of saying, don't hold tokens, don't hold altcoins, they all hold startup equity. Like all of the founders and all of our characters that we love on Bitcoin Twitter, and I love being on Bitcoin Twitter. I spend a lot of my life there and have met incredible friends there. But I just realized that like everyone who's saying only own Bitcoin, don't own altcoins, don't own tokens, they all own startup equity. And then it's like, okay, well, how do you get startup equity? Like startup equity is gate kept by securities laws. Like, and it's very like convoluted how like accredited investor laws keep people out of investing in startups, and then it gets dumped on the public stock market. And Peter Thiel said at Bitcoin 22, like the stock market is quasi-government controlled. And so getting in the weeds of like, how does innovation happen? How do companies start? And because this is a personal finance podcast too, a lot of our episodes have been thinking about like Bitcoin is great savings technology, but I've been trying to ask ourselves, like, am I thinking that I'm going to become wealthy just from savings technology? Or what about like the cash flow pillar of my life? Like, what about my earning potential and like my own, like my skills and what I'm doing? And so there's not a lot of people that talk about like, it's basically all my questions and just thinking is coming from this perspective of like cash flow, and we could relabel it as SATS flow, is like way under researched, and kind of how do companies get formed is truly something that I honestly don't know a lot about, whether it is a corner coffee shop or whether it is like a big software company. So that's kind of, I'm trying to like basically ask myself like what a shorthand way to do it would be. Like, is it possible for the altcoin narrative and the Bitcoin narrative to not be maybe as far apart as I previously thought, I guess?
Yeah, well, you touched on a number of things. Again, the accredited investor law might be a legitimate complaint about current securities structure, especially here in the United States. As far as my understanding is, I'm not really an expert on this field of investing in startups. I know that's a couple of my friends are experts in this field, and from what they tell me, there's basically it's just a self declaration. There's so many exceptions to the accredited investor rule that if you really want to invest in a startup, you can. The question is is it a good rule to have that? Now, I would probably say, maybe not. Maybe it is. Maybe you should allow people who may be quote unquote unsophisticated investors. Maybe you should allow them to, invest in the next Theranos and lose their life savings, thinking they got on the ground floor of this revolutionary new medical tech company, and it turns out that that there was really no there. So I don't know, because part of me says, I don't want to feel like I'm coming off as a nanny state, but part of me says, the reason why this rule was put in place was specifically to protect the unsophisticated investor from somebody like Elizabeth Holmes.
Yep.
And yes, as far as the I kind of forgot the second part
Well,
of it.
so I agree. I agree that's why the rule's there. And it goes back to where you're saying, like,
Yeah.
the reason why Bitcoin is interesting and amazing is because if the money itself holds its value, then you're no longer forced to go into the stock market. Because when you're
Right.
forced to go into the stock market, then you're forced to continue to chase and chase and chase longer shots. So that's what leads to like regular people then quote unquote needing protection or whatever. And I agree. And why you're another like just great guy to have this conversation with is because you are like you do constantly think about kind of like, I just loved your term, like not being a nanny stater, like really understanding, where is the line like on this thing.
Right.
And so I want to bring this up too, that just kind of hopping all over, like we had Yago from Sovereign on the podcast also, and he said something that's basically like he just feels something in the effect of like the Ethereum crowd has like half the solution and the Bitcoin crowd has half the solution, and it's that Bitcoiners like understand fix the money, fix the world, but then kind of Ethereum just for like a broad basket of just kind of I could just use crypto instead of Ethereum, but either way, like using software instead of like brick and mortar centralized or establishment institutions, like that is roughly good, right? Like is using software instead of like
Right.
like old world legacy things is positive, right?
Right, absolutely, 100% agree with that. I'll touch on the software aspect of it here
Yeah.
briefly, but I just wanted there was one other point I wanted to make regarding cash flow. I think that under the fiat system, we're used to having basically some sort of a rent seeking cash flow system where if you're rich enough, you don't really have to worry about being productive anymore. You can just put your money to work for you, and you can just automatically just live off of that cash flow.
Yeah.
And I'm not so certain that if we live in a Bitcoin standard, that's going to be possible. I think that every single person, rich, poor, or middle class, in order to have some form of cash flow, they have to be providing some sort of service that is useful. So I this idea of I need to have a way to have my money work for me. I think that this is a remnant of the fiat system, and what we're
Yes.
trying to do is we've lived under the system for 50 years. We're so used to having this cantillon and this fiat, these bond mentality where you just get money just for putting, just on your money for nothing.
Yep.
That I think that um, that what's happening is with crypto, what people are doing is they're trying to say, well, how do I make money on my crypto the same way you do in the fiat system? I'm saying I'm not so sure that's going to be the solution. I might be wrong on this, but
Yep.
I'm thinking that if you're thinking I'm just going to get a bunch of bitcoins and then just kind of sit back and live on a beach somewhere and just have my Bitcoin make me more Bitcoin just out of nowhere without having to actually do anything productive. I don't think that's going to happen. So every single person, Bitcoin Twitter talks about this all the time. Do something, be productive. Don't just
Hmm.
provide some service for the world. Don't just think that just because you own X number of Bitcoins that you're good. So yeah, that is a legitimate issue. Now, as far as the software aspect of it goes, uh, I think that sometimes people are conflating two different things. I believe it may have been Peter Thiel or somebody else. I'm not really sure who it was that said this, but for some reason, I think it was Peter Thiel that said this, where he said software will eat the world. And basically, what he means by that is like pretty much every single important thing that needs to be done in the world will eventually be turned over into software. Like a couple of examples would be like, for example, Uber is software, and it's basically taken over the taxi cab industry. So basically, it's just a piece of software that connects drivers and passengers together. That's just one quick example, but that's basically what I see when I see software taking over the world.
Yep.
Yes, software is taking over the world, and everything that can be made more efficient with software will be. But I don't necessarily know if that means we need Ethereum or if
Yeah.
we need a blockchain for that. I feel like
Yep.
it, there people are conflating two things. Oh, Ethereum is software. Software will take over the world. Therefore, Ethereum will take over the world. Therefore,
Yep.
Ethereum is the world computer. And I don't necessarily know if validation is the same thing as computing.
Yep.
So I feel like these people have kind of lost the narrative here, and
Yep.
they don't know exactly what it is that they're fighting for. They just know that this is new tech, this is software, this is number go up, and people are just jumping into this thing thinking that they're on the ground floor of this big revolution. It's the Matt Damon
Yep.
advertisement all over again.
Yep.
It's like, oh, you want
Yep.
to be a pioneer, you want
Yep.
to get on the ground floor of the next, big thing, next Facebook, so
Dude,
buy this crypto.
perfect. So now combining both of those things, and I want to stick on the Uber example. So combining, I agree that the kind of like obsession with passive income or obsession with kind of like needing cash flow to keep up with fiat debasement is or like cash flow being the result of the Cantillon effect because some people are able to borrow money at a lower means and then put it to work and then just completely agree. And that's why I kind of but what has kind of been like I'm working out in my brain right now is it yes, crypto is copying kind of that old world like obsession with passive and like rent seeking and things like that. It also seems like potentially the current way Bitcoin startup investing happens could be also like replicating the old world of needing to have the angels and then have the series and then the series and then the series. And it's like, what metrics are you building metrics to having cash flowing software, or are you building metrics to like climb this like, kind of like old world game of like create? I'm not sure. And that, like, so that's one thing that's in my brain that I'm like trying to work through. And then what you said of like Uber is software eating the world, and Uber has decentralized the world and provided a very valuable service to like regular people being able to get around. And it's provided a way that other people can then build a business on top of Uber and be an independent contractor and control their own schedule and do all that. And so that's amazing. And agreed that like, so now to the point of like, does an Uber need a blockchain? And it's like, okay, so clearly no, the current Uber doesn't need a blockchain because like it's a thing and it's alive. One thing I'm wondering though, and this is very raw, like, and so like react to it however, Uber is still tied into credit cards and tied into the public stock market and tied into the fiat system. And they were incentivized to build Uber. The engineers and the entrepreneurs that were incentivized to build Uber were incentivized to build inside this box that would get an A, then get a B, then go public and do this thing. And so, like, what if for the next Ubers of the world to actually break the establishment, they had to have a different funding mechanism to be incentivized to have Bitcoin as the payment structure inside the app rather than credit cards and public market funding? Like, what if and that's to the whole thing of like, oh, that doesn't need a blockchain. Oh, that doesn't need a blockchain. I agree. I don't super love the word blockchain, but I'm kind of thinking, I've been trying to think about the word like smart contract more lately. And I know that's another kind of just like fluffy, like just sprinkle it on everywhere. But it's like, if there was software that was a marketplace that presented to people to trigger automated Bitcoin payments when XYZ if then statement happened, now we're like, so I tweeted out, and this could be kind of now how we get into the flow of, we redefined what money is. Like, we invented better money. We software coded better money. Now I'm asking the question out loud, do we have to invent better companies? Like, do we have to reinvent what a company is?
That's a very good question because I know you mentioned the credit cards and everything, which is where Uber's payment system works. Doesn't use Bitcoin, but I was more interested in what you said before that, or right after that, which was the funding mechanism of how Uber started. The reason why a company like Uber was able to start was because of the Cantillon effect, where you had these Silicon Valley tech bros, these VC bros, who had basically access to the money printer, where they can take a bunch of money and throw it onto Uber, or, start it, see if it works. If it doesn't work, no big deal. They just print more money and go on to the next project. And if it works, great, they become billionaires. So that's a very good point. And it's not one that I've actually thought about very often. I guess I'm kind of like you in this. I'm not really an expert on how to founding a company. You mentioned earlier about a lot of these Bitcoin maximalists. They have startup equity, and I don't have any startup equity myself. I do own stocks, and some Bitcoin maximalists may be upset with me for owning traditional stocks and thinking, oh, you should just put everything in Bitcoin. You should not own any stocks. But I to be honest, the stocks that I do own are all Bitcoin related stocks. So, so if the Bitcoin ship goes down, I'm going down with the ship, so, but even the fact that I own stocks that are traded on the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange, even if they're Bitcoin related stocks, people would look down on. And this is, so yeah, that's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about that very, very much. So how do you start a centralized company, or maybe a quote unquote decentralized company, whatever the hell that means?
Right.
Under a Bitcoin standard. I mean, you really have to either have the money, or you have to go to a bank and have to prove to the bank that your idea is not, completely, crazy. So it would be more difficult, I guess, to start a company. And maybe that's a good question. And I don't know, maybe that'll make a more efficient market where people will only invest in stuff that makes more sense rather than just throwing money at 20 different companies, and hopefully one out of the 20 becomes a unicorn or something like that. I don't know.
Right. Let's stick on that. Uber is a product of the Cantillon effect. Let's stick on that. I've never explicitly said it like that simple of a sentence either. Uber is a product of the Cantillon effect. And one way that I have said that is, you know how in Bitcoin we talk about like kill your heroes, and we talk about like no leaders, and we talk about how the software is the leader, or just like consensus among people or whatever. So I actually believe, like, I think charisma is very real. I think like leadership and needing like people with ideas and bold ideas, I think is very real. I think humans, individuals, do have the ability to put a dent in the world. One thing that I've been curious about is like why all of our billionaires in the United States, they seem very like on the side of the establishment. Like they seem very like they'll kind of talk like they might not be, or they explicitly talk like they are, but it's kind of like, dude, what's the downside? Like why not just do it? Like why not just really go for it? And so that's when I heard Peter Thiel like say that of like the stock market is quasi government controlled. It's like it truly is that you're kind of between a rock and a hard place. Like you either like life is good on top. It's like this. You know that Black Mirror episode? This could be a very specific. The Black Mirror episode where they all ride the Peloton bike in the bottom of the basement and they watch the screens. Have you seen this one? And then
I'm not familiar with that particular
all right,
episode.
let me try to explain what happens. So all the plebs are on bikes and they're forced to ride bikes in the episode, and they have to just eat all this like brainwashing stuff all the time. Your one ticket out is you have to save up a bunch of money, go on an American Idol style show, and if you win, and then everyone else on the bikes is watching and judging you. If you win the competition, then you like get elevated, right? So there's one ticket out. The one guy saves up a bunch of money, goes on the show, and completely just shit talks the entire thing. Like basically just calls it all the way out, and you think that like something's gonna happen, but then everyone just like claps for him, and he gets his own podcast, and the podcast is about shitting on the entire thing. And so now he's allowed to live on the top, but everyone else is still riding the bike and just listening to his podcast. Yeah. But now he
he's
has
part
these,
of the
like,
system that, but yes, he's talking against the system, but he's also part of it. Yeah,
exactly. And so that's like, to me. And dude, this is a very powerful argument against Bitcoin. Like I've also been trying to, this is completely just mixing and pulling everything, but like I've also been trying to think about Bitcoin from the perspective of like progressives. Like because I think that there's been just great talk on Twitter this year, and I've been loving meeting like new people. And one of the arguments against Bitcoin is like, oh, you're just recreating the 1%. You're just recreating the new like people that are the shadow elite or whatever. And okay, to talk back against that, or to talk through that, you have to then again get very in the weeds about how money creation works and why like set in stone monetary policy that no one can like corrupt at the base level, why that's different. But that's a very hard thing to understand because it requires software knowledge, and it requires like, we've been lied to so many times that like, oh, this is going to change the world, this is going to change the world, this is going to change the world. Like that's where the skepticism comes from. So it's like, how do you like, I think it's somewhere in there is tied to the like crypto land has a bunch of tinkering trying to solve these quote unquote other problems that a lot of people are like self-admittedly like agreeing and believing that fixing the money is a bigger problem that needs to be solved. But it's kind of like, what if it is all more connected than we kind of understand currently, but we're all still very like burned by 2017 vaporware?
Well, you touched on a couple of things which are very closely related. I don't know if you did that on purpose, but you started out by mentioning the billionaires, where none of them seem to be interested in liberty or in Bitcoin or sound money. And obviously, it's because they understand, most of these billionaires understand that the way they got there and the way they protect their wealth is through the Cantillon effect and through, basically government protectionism. We're talking about patents. We're talking about different types of ways that government puts up barriers to entry to protect all these companies. There's no reason why, 95% of the phones need to be either Apple or Samsung, but they are, because if I come up with a better phone, I would immediately be sued 1,000 times by 1,000 different companies claiming to have a patent on what I just created. So, and this is the part where I think that some Bitcoiners kind of miss the boat, And I think that most of the people who go on Twitter and rail against Bitcoin maximalism, I think most of them are just shady characters, and they're or they're idiots or something. But there is an aspect of what a lot of them say, which I do agree with, where you have this monolithic type of thinking going on, where it's like you have to do this and that, otherwise you're not a true Bitcoiner. And a lot of these people are very hostile to progressives, and I don't get it. I mean, progressives. They're not wrong about everything. I'm not a progressive. I traditionally grew up, as a Republican, and I would consider myself conservative until about maybe 2013 is when I stopped really, taking on that label. I don't really think I'm a conservative anymore. But
Mhm.
basically, what what a lot of people are missing is that when progressives rail against billionaires, a lot of us knee jerk come to the defense of these billionaires. And just why? Because these guys are against it, so they meant and they're wrong. So they must be.
Mhm.
So we have to take the other side automatically. And you've fallen into
Mhm.
this trap, this
Mhm.
left right trap, where you have to disagree
Mhm.
with these people just because
Mhm.
they're leftists or they're progressives. And
Mhm.
instead of just knee jerk attacking a leftist next time they rail against billionaires, is we say, yeah, I agree with you. Maybe
100%, because they're saying the Cantillon effect. They're railing against the Cantillon effect. That's the same way I felt about the student loan thing, dude. I was like,
yeah,
"Oh, student loan forgiveness is bad."
yeah,
How is student loan forgiveness bad if fiat money is not real? Like fiat money is
right,
fake and literally a lie. So all they're doing is saying that yes, it's fake and a lie, which I agree with.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I didn't, I didn't really tweet much about the student loan stuff. I know everyone was talking about it for like 3 days straight, and I didn't
Mhm.
really say much about it, pro or against. I just kind of sat back and listened. But I did find it very interesting that at the same time, the same day that Joe Biden announces the student loan forgiveness, the exact same day they quietly approve another. I forgot how many $1 billion aid package it was to Ukraine. So there's like
Mhm.
it's like, oh, here, look, come pay attention to this, tweet about
Mhm.
this, student loan forgiveness. And while in the in the background they're doing some really really shady shit. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very good point. And yeah, so basically, what's going to happen under a Bitcoin standard is, if you think that wealth inequality is really really bad, and you don't
Mhm.
think these people should be mega billionaires, and have other people that just barely survive on $1 a day. You know what? I agree with you, and I think that
Mhm.
a Bitcoin standard will bring about that. I think you will have the end of these giant monolithic corporations that control every aspect. So we will
Yes.
get this decentralization. It's not going to come through a shitcoin. It's just going to come from the decentralization that you want and I want, and everybody wants, is going to come from having a sound money system, where if you make a
Yes.
mistake, you actually pay for it. You actually
Yes.
end up with less Bitcoin. You
Yeah.
don't just get to print up another $1 billion, and go invest in another
Yes.
project again.
Here's
Yeah,
It'll
go ahead.
come. It'll come when Bitcoin is the base currency meat space, and now also the base currency of Web3. Like, and I'm getting comfortable with just the term Web3. Like, it has to
Yeah,
be the base currency meat space and the base currency of Web3. And I think I think your point of, yeah, the billionaires recognize that they are a product of the Cantillon effect and they don't want the Cantillon effect to go away, which is the reason why they're not anti-establishment. But it's like, so if all VC funding is some degree a level of the Cantillon effect and just kind of flowing down, or we could just say the majority. I should say the
mhm,
majority,
sure.
not say
Yeah,
all, because
majority. Yeah,
you're
I
correct.
agree.
Some people
Yeah,
create wealth out of creating sustainable businesses and then choose to reinvest that, and that is their business. Totally. So but I wonder, because Peter Thiel said in his speech, like, your investing is political. Like, choosing to flow funds into Bitcoin is a political decision. Choosing to flow funds into Ethereum is a political decision. Choosing to flow funds into Uber is a political decision. And I think that's where I feel like on Bitcoin Twitter collectively, we're losing our game theory sharpness a little bit. Like, something that impresses so many people about Bitcoin Twitter and so many about Bitcoiners collectively as a person is that, like, their game theory sharpness and their ability to see through the establishment and see through kind of what you were saying of just the drag and drops and like puppeteering and all that stuff. One thing that I think we're a little bit underestimating is what Thiel is saying about the investment flows are political. And so the people that are choosing to understand the Bitcoin thesis and not participate in it They are choosing to continue building the world as it is. And so what is our response to that as Bitcoiners?
Mhm.
There isn't really a great one right now. Like, there is not
Sure.
a collective great, it's more of just kind of like a over here, over here. And I would say, off the top of my head right now, or something, it's like, we have to build better products, which I know sounds just such like lots of people are working on that, right? Like, lots of people are working on building better products, doing things that users want, blah, 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 all this stuff. But if if our Bitcoin funding is coming from loosely the same kind of place that the like establishment fintech funding is coming from, or if it's like hundreds of degrees less,
Mhm.
we're not in a political position
Sure.
to really be combating against that right now. And it's like I'm as the biggest optimist of like I carry with me a lot of optimism. Lately, I have had like an underlying pessimism that has been
Mhm.
really hard to shake lately. And it's
Yeah.
tied to this stuff of not having a great solution for Bitcoin like continuing to be the base current, like continuing to be the base currency. And because when you kind of bring it up, the largest yelling response is just basically, well, good money drives out bad money, and it's just math.
Mhm.
Humanity always goes towards the hardest money, which
Sure.
is true, but also like I want my 15-month-old son to be in a world where he has bank optionality of no longer needing to use the fiat money system. Like, I want him to be able to work on software from our Citadel and be paid in Bitcoin. Like,
Mhm.
are we on track for that being the world 12 years from now?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, and I can understand the pessimism. And just like you, I'm an eternal optimist. I think that things are always getting better. They appear to always be getting worse, but as a general rule, they always get better, and which is very unusual for a libertarian because most libertarians are pessimists. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's a very good point because I think that a lot of Bitcoiners just assumed, and myself included, just assumed that it's just math and it's going to work itself out, and we just have to sit back and just wait long enough and it will work itself out. And to be honest, I still think that if you wait a long enough time, it will work itself out. However, um, to go from being a niche risk investment product to being the world reserve currency is a pretty daunting task. I think Bitcoin is up to the challenge, but it's not going to just happen automatically. We're not going to just be able to, buy, 20 Bitcoins, put ourselves in cryogenic sleep, and then wake up, 200 years later, and
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, we're the richest people in the world. So I think that it is going to take some actual work, and maybe. Um, Bitcoiners ignoring the political process, myself included, has been a mistake. I think that if you had talked to me back in 2015, I would have said the politics is all bullshit, and all we need to do is stack Sats, or I
Yeah.
wouldn't have said stack Sats
Yeah.
specifically. I would have said all you need to do is buy Bitcoin. But
I wouldn't even put
yeah,
it. I want to add one more thing to that. I wouldn't even put it on like just ignoring the political process. I would put it on lots of things, like ignoring Web3, ignoring NFTs, ignoring like regular day to day politics, ignoring how like startup investing works, ignoring how like just boom 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 down the thing.
mm,
It's like, I don't think you should, like, I tweet this out and it's easier said than done, but it's like, you don't need to join the Bitcoin industry. Like, you need to take Bitcoin to your industry. Like, Bitcoin is software, and that it's almost like it's almost like we're all dreaming too small. It's almost like we did allow just Bitcoin as sound money to be put in our brain, which is like, again, everything's true. And that's I'm not even tearing down anything that like I quote unquote used to believe in. I'm like, I want this to be additive of like, if it's true that Bitcoin is on a math course to be the like math and meme course, this is where maximalists of like other coins, something that they discount is like the meme of Bitcoin, I guess. Just like put
Yeah,
it
the
funnily, like
memetics of Bitcoin,
it's
absolutely.
on Fortune 500 balance sheets. Like the network effect is there, and it's like, okay, can that network effect be eroded, and can something else take its place? Sure, yes, like yes, I understand how product like technology products like move and whatever, but it's like the network effects of money are stronger network effects of other tech. Like, and you can already see how different smart contract platforms are being eroded by other platforms, and it's like you like Bitcoin as base currency and Bitcoin being mentioned as a replacement for the dollar, that's already in the world. Like the foreshadowing already went into the world. You
Right.
can't pull that back once that foreshadowing is already out there and moving.
Sure.
Like that's moving and moving and moving.
It's
And
inevitable. I like that.
yeah, and more
Scary.
people, there's more people per day that their brain is switching towards that. And so this is what I'm saying. Web3 builders and people building other things in crypto buzzword land, they're still mapping their mental currency to USD. So they have, whereas Bitcoin and Bitcoiners have done the hard work and are doing the hard work of literally like I'm giving up the first 30 years of my life where I was using USD as my base mental like thing, and I'm choosing to go use the new one. Now, moving backwards to using like this piece of software instead of this piece of software, that's a slant, like that's gonna happen. Like that's gonna happen because that's easy. Like the hard work is switching the base currency that you used your entire life. And so that's already happening. And it's like I think I guess if I was to summarize it, I think the killer app for Bitcoin, the quote unquote killer app from Bitcoin, probably won't come from a company that is funded or created the same way that legacy companies are created. Now, that doesn't mean that companies that are like that are creating excellent bridges with meat space. Every single XYZ Bitcoin startup and all of the founders and everyone who works there on Bitcoin Twitter, like I am rooting for that. And I am believing that like Bitcoin is taking ground against like legacy meat space finance on the backs of all those people working on that every day. 100%. Now, what I think is, I think there's going to be a whole class of new people that are going to do the exact same thing, basically backwards into Web3.
Sure. Well, the Web3, that's very interesting because there might be something to Web3. I don't quite get it myself. So you probably are more into this stuff than I am. I don't really see the appeal of Web3 because to me Web3 originally meant Internet of Things, which I thought was ridiculous. I don't need my coffee machine connected to the internet. I don't need my dog's, food bowl connected to the internet that, automatically dispenses food, every so many hours or something like that. So that was the original Web3. And there was a guy named Brian Sovereign. I don't know if he's still around. I don't know if he's still active, but he's a very, very cool podcaster. And he talked about Internet of Things as Internet of Targets. How about how easily these things can get hacked because they don't really have the type of security in place and the type of what's the word firmware in place to updated firmware to protect themselves from being hacked. Now, you mentioned NFTs. I mean, look, I don't get it, but just because I don't get it doesn't mean that there's nothing there. Maybe I'm just
Yeah.
a boomer here and I just don't understand the appeal of NFTs, but maybe I'm missing something. I don't know if I am or not. I may be missing something, or I may just be looking at saying, this is just stuff that is being pushed on us, just like eat the
Yep.
bug, get the
Yep.
NFT, you own
Yep.
nothing. So
Yep.
are VCs pushing this and making people think that
Yep.
this is the future, or is this actually the future because people are actually interested in this? Because
Yep.
um, I log on to my sportsbook app and immediately the sportsbook is trying to push NFTs on me. And I'm like, what do I
Yes.
need this for? I just want to bet on the
Yes.
game. I don't want to,
Yes.
I don't want to
Dude,
collect.
so listen.
Yeah,
Perfect. No, exactly. And those are all outstanding questions. Those are
sure.
all outstanding questions that
Unknown at this point.
they
Yeah.
deserve answers. And
Yeah.
here's where I'm enjoying just kind of mixing and matching a lot of language. I don't know if this was my like definition of Web3 then, or this is what I should have said in that sentence instead of Web3. Like,
Mhm.
I think using software, like automated software, instead of messy human manual processes, like that is going to happen. in terms of like software eating the world. And it's like and I should say anti-establishment software, freedom creating software. Like if Endgame, because you're right. Another frustrating thing about Web3 and DeFi in its current form is that it doesn't map to meat space. It doesn't map to meat space. And like here's an because I liked how we talked about fundraising, and now we're over here talking about Web3 and DeFi because like if you're like I like how you talked about going to a bank. Like going to a bank for a loan is a perfect like I think that is the perfect just kind of use case to think about because in a world where DeFi and your Bitcoin is your credit score, you still need DeFi to map to meat space. And that's then tied to the circular economy. Because like if I go and use software on the internet instead of a centralized bank to receive a loan under XYZ conditions, I still need that software, that internet money to be accepted by the local people, the local laborers or the local whatever to do like the work. And so that's how that's all connected. Like you can't fully live in the metaverse and you can't fully live in meat space. And that's what, so yes, like it has to map to something. It has to map to something. And I think we have to separate like, what I hope Web3 and DeFi NFTs do is I hope they separate companies and state. So we separated money and state,
Right.
but what incentivizes Uber, which is still connected to the state, to use Bitcoin as the payment rail instead of credit cards? Nothing. Like that's a very uphill climb. And currently our answer is math. And it's like, well, the people in charge of decision making at Uber are not motivated by math. They're products of the Cantillon effect and they're already on top of the pile making everyone else eat the bugs and ride the bikes and drive the Ubers or whatever. They're not motivated by that. Like, so you can't say, so like that's looking at the game theory completely wrong. Another Uber has to come from the ground up with Bitcoin from the beginning. And that has to be a 100x product on the old one to create freedom. That's the same way BTC Pay Server and the same way like the actual replacement one-to-one for things that are happening in the legacy connected to the state world have to be created. And software only applications will probably be the first ones, but then we need ones that then map. It's all about incentives. Like the software engineers have to, and builders, like we always talk about bear market is for building,
Right.
But everyone, like there's no process right now for an anti-establishment company to be like cash flowing to a level that or I should say very rarely get big enough to get to a level where the producers and the contributors are paid handsomely. So then you're constantly being picked off and having to moonlight in the establishment world still.
Right. Exactly. That's a very good point. And I'm so glad you brought this up and clarified your position because this is what originally led to you saying, hey, why don't we talk about this or, for an hour or so, where you're talking about, it's about separating companies from state. And that was what your original tweet was about. And I was like, yeah, if these altcoins, whatever you want to call them, DeFi, crypto, if they come out and they say, look, we're companies and be proud that they're companies. And instead of trying to, cosplay as some decentralized project that has no leader, when you have a leader who's basically guiding every single aspect of everything that's happening in your project. And again, it goes back to kind of the point that I've been making several times throughout this podcast is when you're talking about, missing the point. You and I agree on this one point, which is that that you don't really want a company that's run by 2,000 people who are making decisions, who are voting every day on what's the price of the cup of coffee today, how many beans do we need to buy from what source. That stuff does not need to be voted on by 2,000 people daily, and we don't need 2,000 investors to see how much money got into the cash register today at the end of every single day. The current fiat system has a system where this stuff is reported quarterly. So what do the crypto people say? No, let's not report it quarterly because by then it's too late. Let's find out what's happening at the end of each day. And what you and I might say, and correct me if I'm wrong, what we would say is no, maybe even quarterly is too often. You want to have companies that build for the long term, that are thinking 10 years ahead, not to just make it to the next
Yeah,
quarterly report. So this
yeah,
is what Jeff Bezos did is he let his investors know very early on, listen, if you're investing in Amazon because you're looking for the next quarterly results, you're in the wrong company. We're not thinking about the next quarter. We're thinking about the next 20 years. And he made that very clear with his investors. He had to do quarterly reports because the law requires him to do quarterly reports. And for the longest time, people were saying Amazon's not a good investment because it's not a profitable company. People aren't
mhm,
really saying that anymore, but that's what they were saying in the 90s and the early 2000s. And maybe we're crypto is trying to solve something, but maybe they're looking in the wrong direction. Maybe they're saying instead of saying we need to have people who have the autonomy to run their business the way they see fit without outside influence kind of messing with their vision, to now no, we need 2,000 plebs to be looking at every single thing that this company is doing and making a
right,
micromanaging decision every single day.
right,
Yeah,
right,
so I think they're maybe missing the point. So yeah,
right.
I
What? Yep.
stop cosplaying. Stop pretending you're some
Yes.
decentralized project. Just tell me you're a company and tell me what
Yep.
your vision is and tell me what you're trying
Yep.
to do and do it.
Yep.
And you'll do it more efficiently rather than pretending to be some sort of a decentralized database.
Yes. No. So Patrick is recounting. We were talking about DAOs, decentralized
Yeah,
autonomous
DAOs. That's right.
organizations, and how DAO like governance happens. And I agree. Like, I think that the current way that DAOs are, the current set of them on the internet, are trying to bite off more than they can chew. And they're not recognizing that, like, they are overcomplicating a lot. They're overcomplicating a lot of things. And we need to step back from that and focus on just getting sats flowing software onto the internet and getting contributors paid, whether they're workers or investors. Just get cash flowing software on the internet and people paid will push forward freedom way faster than kind of meandering DAOs.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah,
you said it perfectly right there. That's exactly it. It's like maybe um, we all have the same vision, we all have the same goal in mind, but just people just have a different idea of how to get there.
it's
And maybe we've solved the whole debate of altcoins versus Bitcoin. I don't know. Maybe we did.
perfect. No, dude, that was the goal. Well, no,
Yeah.
and it's very, because it's all complicated. We can kind of end on this. It's just it's
Yes.
all complicated, and it's taken me a long time of observing and going things and trying things to be able to have in-depth conversations like this. To be honest, like, this conversation is not, it's not a starting like 101 conversation. Like, it's very confusing, like, to get all the way to what is the purpose of Bitcoin, what has been tried before, what are the ails of the legacy system, what can happen now, and then on top of all of that, even if you solve it, the day-to-day like ego and incentives of people in the real world is hard to navigate. Like, it's literally hard. Like, what, and I like how you said, no, trying to be the base currency of the world is hard. Like, that's the biggest
Yeah.
thing you could try to do. So yeah,
100%.
cool. What yeah, hit us with any closing thoughts and tell us your Twitter and
Yeah.
hit anything.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Brian. I've been really excited to have this discussion with you. I'm going to be in LA in a couple of days. I don't know how long I'm staying, probably a couple of weeks. So any of the LA plebs, hit me up. You can find me on Twitter at Bitcoin Motorist. I'm also on YouTube, Telegram, Instagram, Clubhouse, all on the same handle at Bitcoin Motorist. So hit me up wherever you can find me, and stack sats and don't stop believing.
Perfect. All right, everyone. Catch you on the next one.
Hey all, this is Brian. You can reach me on Twitter at Brain Harrington. Shoot me a DM with any feedback from today's episode. This has been a Choice App production. Bitcoin is becoming centric to personal finance, and we want to help you learn how to better engage with Bitcoin financial services. None of this is financial advice and is for education and entertainment only.